So how are we feeling? Isn't that a great reboot song? Reboot, reboot. So Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Now let me ask you something, and I wonder this every New Year, is when is it too late to wish someone Happy New Year? February. Well, you know, I wonder about that. I guess if you haven't seen the person all year, then at the end of the year, you could even say Happy New Year, but you know, it's kind of funky. So maybe we need to reboot that idea about how long we can say Happy New Year to someone. So think about that. So as Lorraine said, you know, we reboot our computers, you know, when they get glitchy, when they freeze up. And what a great analogy to this time of year of thinking about, you know, what is going on in my life that's glitchy that might benefit, you know, that paradigm that I'm operating from, maybe it needs to change. And so what can I do to reboot that idea, that paradigm, whatever's glitchy in our life? And what I'd like to suggest is that we reroot ourselves or root ourselves in the remembrance of who we've come here to be. Because that gets to a much deeper purpose for us. And if you've been coming to a Science of Mind center anytime in the last 20 years, 30 years, whatever, traditionally, the month of January, we revisit the first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind textbook. The thing itself, the way it works, what it does, and how to use it. 26 pages encompassing the entire teaching. And if you've studied it and learned it and restudied it and learned it and embodied it and practiced, you're well on the way of having some command of the creative process. Now, if you don't know what the creative process is, it's a power, an intelligence, a wisdom, a force, a felt presence that permeates every aspect of creation. It's in every one of us. It's not something that we need to earn, but we certainly need to learn it. We don't have to earn it, but we need to learn it. Because it will create exactly according to our predominant, habitual thinking, feeling, whatever we do. So we've got to practice. So it's simple, right? Well, Ernest Holmes, our founder, had a dream. And in his Sermon by the Sea, and you've probably all heard this before, he says this: "You find me 1,000 people in the world who know what religious science is and use it and live it as it is, and I'll myself live to see a new world, a new heaven, and a new earth." Have you heard that before? Yeah. Know it, use it, and live it. So Ernest Holmes is dead. I'm here now. And I wonder what Ernest would say, whether he would be surprised at how little progress we've made toward that new earth, that new heaven. You know, have we made progress? And so it's safe to ask, well, why? Why haven't we seen that? And I suppose there's a lot of good reasons for it. Chief among them, maybe it's because we spend all our time trying to make it a religion instead of an interpretation of life, which I think makes a big difference because that puts pressure on the organization and the ministers to find the best way to use it and teach it. But I think it gets in the way of living it. I just wonder about that. Because I know for me, you know, even in the busyness of life, I get distracted. And so I know that when I get distracted and, you know, the ship hits the sand, that I need to use it, but I may not be living it with every breath that I take. And I think there's a big difference there. So as you may know, Reverend Kath and I, my wife, recently returned from a minister's retreat in Egypt. And it was a life-changing experience, like climbing a mountain. Well, on the way down the mountain, you know, we're both exhilarated and exhausted, trying to process everything that we were going through. And we landed home just before Thanksgiving, like 2 days before. Now, fortunately, we were in contact with my son, and he went to Whole Foods and ordered all the stuff, and so we were able to bring it home and, hit the ground running for establishing what I like to call base camp. Base camp is where you, refresh, catch your breath, replenish the stores for the next, climb or assault or whatever you're going to do, right? Whatever the goal is. Well, I call it the base camp holiday experience because it goes from Thanksgiving through New Year's. It's a long stretch of time. And in that, of course, you deal with all of the extended family. We did a Zoom with Kath's family in South Carolina, with my family in Connecticut, with my daughter in Wisconsin. We had my son come into town, my other son come into town. In fact, so the range of my kids is from 24 to 44. And so the 44-year-old just left Monday after spending a week with us. So it's been quite a stretch of activity, all around all of this family stuff. And whether it ranges from, trauma to challenge to exhilaration. And so, you think about, well, what is it that you want to give your kids? You just want to be there for them. You want to give them good advice and nurture and love. And it's like, climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow, till you find your dream. A dream that will need all the love you can give every day of your life for as long as you live. Now, of course, my kids look at me and say, you're crazy. You have no idea what I'm going through. Now, they don't really say that, and I don't really sing to them because they're polite. But the fact is that I have no idea what they're going through. That's their path. And what I know is you can't speak to your autobiography until they feel heard, that they feel validated in whatever it is that they're going through. And so that requires something that few of us know how to do, especially with our kids, is just listen, right? Rather than giving advice. And, so we give them our time, we get into deep conversations, we give them our money, we give them comfort food and advice and all of those things. But I'm here to tell you that the most important thing that reflects on the result is the quality of our spiritual practice, right? The base camp depends on the solidity of our practice to send them out into the world to do what they need to do. And if we don't have that grounding, then we tend to move into the fear and worry and anxiety and all of that, right? So the spiritual practice is fundamental here. And what we know is that when we are grounded in base camp and able to come from that place, they will leave with maybe a little more spring in their step and a smile on their face. Because nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever could. Sometime in my spiritual practice, I must have thought something good. Now, I'm not going to sing anymore. So what is that quality in base camp that increases the efficacy of your spiritual practice? Whether you think about it or not, whether you have kids or not, the quality of your spiritual practice makes all the difference as you think about rebooting or whatever your goal is for this year, whether it's a resolution or whatever you want to intend, whatever mountains you have to climb or rivers to cross. And if we're to fulfill Ernest Holmes' dream, we'll have to do a little more than improve our ability to find parking spaces, or new jobs or relationships. Not that those things aren't important, but it's stuff. It's using the science of mind, not necessarily living it. Does that make sense? So somewhere in our intentions and resolutions for New Year's, there's got to be a commitment to do the most powerful thing that we can do, which is deepen our spiritual practice. And so, where do you spend most of your hours of the day? For most of us, it's been work, right? And those hours of work have led to a certain level of expertise, right? We get good at our jobs. And so if we're to increase our commitment to spiritual practice, what does that mean? We have to spend more time in that practice. I mean, think about the hours that you put into your job to get good. So just an incremental increase will show tremendous results. What I've noticed in myself is too much wishing and hoping. Sorry, I couldn't resist. We tend to smoke the hopium pipe too often. We need to spend more time praying and thinking and planning. Because we don't do that. We tend to come from a place, at least I see in myself, of being reactionary in my treatment, right? Something comes up, bam, do treatment, take care of it. But that's not really living from that place. I love, I guess a couple of weeks ago, Reverend Catherine Bonin was here, and she talked about the universe offers a reservoir of possibilities, a reservoir of possibilities. Imagine that. Now, I know up until just a few days ago, you couldn't really think of a full reservoir. But now that's done, right? For the most part. But when you are thinking of possibilities in your life, do you take a thimble to the reservoir? Do you take a bucket? Do you take a fire hose? Or if you think about it in terms of swimming, are you just swimming along the surface? Or are you ready to take a deep dive into those possibilities? And I think that's really what Ernest Holmes was urging us to do, to fully embody who we have come here to be by diving deeply into the human experience, rather than setting it aside and saying it's all good. Is diving deep into that and understanding that whatever anyone else is experiencing, there is something within me that knows exactly what that is or needs to know what it is from their perspective. To know more deeply what this life is about through the eyes of someone else. Because we are responsible, whether we like it or not, we are responsible for the evolution of consciousness in this life, in this community, in this world. That's the primary reason we're here, for evolving consciousness. Now, consciousness will evolve with or without us. I mean, it will just happen. But we can accelerate it by making a conscious choice to deepen our spiritual practice. And if we're not willing to take that deep dive into practice, then we've got to think about, does complaining about how things are have any traction at all? I love the way Abraham Hicks talks about that, is when we beat the drum of our discontent, it causes more of that discontent to happen in our lives. And so we have to be able to look at ourselves and saying, what discontent, and am I just hammering out there all the time? Because that's how it works. So the question is, what is it that there is to do that accelerates evolution? Because if we're talking about deepening that spiritual practice, where is it? Well, as we mark the Martin Luther King holiday, his dream still points in the right direction, I believe. That his 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Like Ernest Holmes, I wonder if Dr. King might be surprised at the pace of progress in his dream. Even in this community, we still have persons of color flooded by a tsunami of whiteness that drowns their dreams. Even in this community, we have people who have a different orientation toward love that are unsafe and stifled and rejected just in their everyday life. Even in this community, we have elderly that have deep experience and talents that are marginalized as being irrelevant, and they struggle to find their place and purpose in our community. So there's lots of room for us to expand and grow and deepen. Dr. King's daughter, Bernice, said that when her dad talked about the beloved community, he talked about everyone bringing their gifts and talents and their cultural expressions. She says, we live in a society where we may have differences, of course, but we must learn to celebrate those differences. And even beyond celebrating, there's a certain energy that happens when we come together to explore our differences and come up with new ideas, new solutions, innovation, creativity that have never existed before and could not happen unless we had gotten together to do that kind of work. We need to reach across barriers and personal differences, knowing that in doing that, we are divinely inspired, guided, and supported. Whenever we want to manifest something, we want to think about what is the feeling that I would have if this thing were to be manifest. And then, so we think about this in terms of rebooting and what we want for the new year. And then, what are the actions that support that feeling? Not the thing, not the end point, but the feeling. So I asked this community, if we were to demonstrate the beloved community, what would that feel like? And then what actions do we need to take that support that feeling? And when I think about that, it makes me feel good, right? Over the past year, we've had 2 spiritual communities getting to know each other, finding common ground, having difficult to have conversations, praying and playing together. And that makes me feel good. We've come together today to begin working in a safe environment with extraordinary respect and compassion and understanding. And that makes me feel good. You know how I'm feeling? And now we have 5 teams of 46 people from diverse backgrounds with extraordinary talents, setting up a base camp supported by all of you to ascend into the rarefied atmosphere of exploring and discovering that beloved community. Oh, that makes me feel real good. Exactly. You know how I'm feeling? It's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new year. And how are we feeling? We're feeling good. And so it is.